Way back when the Wii was launched, it came bundled with the title Wii Sports, basically a fun little tech demo of the game that got people familiarised with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck and how they could be used to play games for the console. When the Wii U was released, the game that Nintendo released to try and fill this role was Nintendo Land, a collection of minigames all based on different Nintendo franchises that demonstrate various different methods of using the gamepad to play games on the Wii U. But how well did Nintendo Land actually fulfill this role of demonstrating how the gamepad could be used, and more importantly, is it a good enough game to consider buying if you didn't get bundled with your console in the first place? Well, let's find out as we look at Nintendo Land considerably more than 1 year on. Nintendo Land itself is a theme park with 12 different attractions to play in, and when not playing in one of the attractions you have this huge hub area to wander around in, with a bunch of Miis randomly selected from Miiverse, and a living computer screen that serves as your guide and tutorial giver in this game. Her name is Monita. How on earth they could have come up with such an amazing name like that is beyond me. You have two main things that you want to obtain whilst playing in the 12 attractions. Those are stars and coins. The stars are needed to officially beat the game, although beating the game merely unlocks a glorified ending credits sequence, so it's really not that worth it. The collected coins, however, can be used in the giant pachinko machine in the middle of the plaza to win items to decorate your plaza with. The prizes from the machine include a jukebox and music from the attractions, statues of various characters and items from within the attractions, and switches that have various different effects, including one that lets your Mii become giant. And since this game is comprised of 12 different minigames, I decided the best way to look at it would essentially be a top 12 list and count down from worst to best of them. So without further ado,
Number 12.
Octopus Dance. The Wii U seems to be the platform that Mr. Game & Watch is trying to make his comeback on, but this minigame is definitely not one of the best. So here's the game. The instructor, this thing here with a window frame for a head, will do 3 different dance moves to the beat of the music, and you have to repeat the dance moves back to him. HG Simon! The way the gamepad gets included in this is that the left stick of the gamepad controls your left arm at all times, and the right stick your right arm. The instructor will occasionally spin your Mii around, so you have to switch which screen you're looking at, either the TV screen or the gamepad. Why your Mii can't just turn back around again, I don't. Anyway, you think this would be easy enough to handle, but the hit detection on what dance moves are acceptable flip-flops all the time between pixel perfect strictness and I can see what you're going for there. I'll let that slide. This detection issue gets especially annoying when it comes to leaning moves that require you to pretty much fling the gamepad at a 90-degree angle left or right to be detected, or throw it up in the air to jump. There's also a built-in face cam feature that uses the camera on the gamepad that basically just serves to distract you when you're looking at the TV screen. It's a waste of space really, and especially when you're using the gamepad screen, because you won't be looking at the TV anyway to see the face cam. But anyway, just be sure to say fuzzy pickles and take a good photo with it. To me, this minigame would be only okay if everything was working well for it, but as it stands, the controls and hit detection just aren't that good, and it's a rather lazy implementation of the gamepad to get into this game. I mean, seriously, you could seriously just watch one screen and do the opposite controls when you get turned around if you're concentrating hard enough. But I mean, at least the music between rounds is actually pretty nice and catchy. I wonder what the people on Miiverse say about this game.
Number 11.
Yoshi's Fruit Cart. Now, before we get into this, I just want to apologise for this game footage and a couple of the other minigames on here. It's just with the way the games are set up, it's kind of difficult to actually give you the full perspective of things because of stuff being played on the gamepad like this. I will try and describe them as best I can, but it's kind of unavoidable for games on this system, so apologies in advance for both this minigame section and a few more coming up. But anyway, the aim of the game is pretty simple. Get your Yoshi cart from the start to the finish by using the gamepad to draw a path for Yoshi to follow that allows him to eat every fruit on screen and then reach the final door. The main obstacle here is that when drawing the path on the gamepad, nothing is on the screen except for any patterns that are in the background. The idea is pretty good and I think it has a decent execution, but once the game starts introducing more elements such as moving through and moving doorways, the game's difficulty quickly begins to ramp up, and this isn't helped much by the fact that the game is very unforgiving with the hitboxes on the fruit, and it requires you to be incredibly precise with your line drawing because of this. The game does try and balance this out with point markers that you can drop on the touchscreen that will appear on both screens, and once you've reached later levels you can warp to them through other doors that appeared within the earlier ones, but a lot of the time this will just result you being warped to a later level and getting defeated even faster. There is definitely aspects of a good puzzle game in here, but as it is now, the game just leaves me either frustrated or actually a little bored after short periods of time. And what really doesn't help is that throughout the game's 50 levels, there's just this one same Yoshi story theme remixed over and over and over and over.
Number 10.
Pikmin Adventure. Everyone's favourite slavery-based Nintendo franchise. Pikmin Adventure is really like a condensed version of the games themselves. You can play as either Captain Olimar with a small group of Pikmin following you, using the gamepad, or you can play as a giant Pikmin by playing with the Wii Remote on its side. If you're playing multiplayer, only one person can play as Olimar, but you can have up to 4 friends play as the giant Pikmin allies with you. Your goal is to get back to Olimar's ship. Sometimes there's enemies, sometimes there's a very strict time limit, but you're always aiming to get back to that ship. Along the way you can find nectar and special seeds that will level up and adapt the Pikmin in various ways, such as the Whip Seed that makes your Pikmin home in on enemies, and the Hammer Seed that dramatically boosts their strength. So why is it ranked so low on this list then? Well, it's not bad, but more incredibly bland to me. The controls for the giant Pikmin are incredibly basic, and if you decide on playing as them, you're in for level after level of using the jump attack repeatedly because that's the only move that's worth anything really. Although Olimar's controls are actually pretty solid. The Pikmin being picked up and thrown wherever you please by touching where you want them to go on the touchscreen, and flicking quickly up on the screen will have you jump, which sounds awkward but you actually get used to it incredibly quickly. You also have a whistle button that will summon back all Pikmin to you immediately no matter where they are, including the giant Pikmin partners. Playing solo in this game can get boring due to lack of level variety in the missions, and playing with friends, while it's more fun, can end up with you screwing each other over due to Olimar's whistle summoning the giant Pikmin away from whatever they were doing, or you and your friends simply start getting way too competitive over who can collect the most nectar so they can become stronger, which makes it difficult to justify this game as a co-op game. To cap this game off, the versus mode, while chaotic, is really not that fun. It just ends up being this kind of monotonous back and forth over these gumdrop things. And here's just one final little nitpick for this minigame. People on Miiverse for some reason can't seem to spell Pikmin. It's 6 letters and it's right there, damn it!
Number 9.
Captain Falcon's Twister Race. Welcome to the first F-Zero game in years, where your me can take on the guise of our Lord and Saviour, Captain Falcon, and drive his legendary vehicle, the purple Falcon. This game is actually pretty simple. With your gamepad turned on its side, you need to drive through a course to a gate on the other side, with what can be a very short time limit. Now you might be as confused as to why the game wants you to actually play with it this way rather than this way, which would be more like a steering wheel. And that's because the game actually wants you to use the gamepad screen to look ahead during the race, and you get more space out of it by going like this. The problem is when actually playing the game, you actually get a lot more range when you're watching on the TV rather than watching on the gamepad. So you end up just using the gamepad solely for steering rather than looking at the TV screen. But this is another one of those games that adds a face cam to the TV screen for no reason really. I mean, who wants to see someone's face in video game footage, right? Despite the odd choice for how they're inputted, the controls, for the most part, feel really good, and you can easily make the game distinguish between when you're just trying to turn and when you're really trying to drift around corners well. I say for the most part though, because although rare, the game will occasionally decide to give up on taking your inputs any longer after doing a turn, and I'm not entirely sure what triggers this. But if your game does get a bit weird, simply pausing it and recalibrating the gamepad in a couple of seconds can return it back to normal at least. The rainbow ramps in this game can honestly go screw themselves. They're way too picky on the angle that you need to be at taking them, and if you do hit them ever so slightly wrong, it can result in you flying off the side of the course. The game also provides ghost data for you to race against, which is pretty good and helpful in actually improving, but for some reason the ghost is only the fastest time performed during that play session, and not even the fastest time you ever gotten on your Wii U. And on top of that, I think there's a really missed opportunity in the fact that you can't download any friend times, which would be good to actually compete against each other with. And finally, the remixes of F-Zero themes in this game sound absolutely fantastic. But unfortunately, you have to put up with 8 stages of generic background music first before you can actually get to this really good music, which obviously kind of sucks. Overall, this minigame is a bit of a mixed bag, but I still enjoy returning to it from time to time, and I can get a good bit of enjoyment and a good race out of it. Plus, this is the closest you're going to be getting to an F-Zero game anytime soon, so you might have to make do.
Number 8.
Camaros Ninja Castle. Based on the classic Famicom game, Nazo no Marasama Joe. What, you've never heard of it? Me neither. This is a pretty fun and fast-paced minigame. For this game you need to turn your gamepad and point it at the TV, and then swipe your finger along it to throw shurikens at ninjas in what is basically just a ninja-themed shooting gallery. And really, who doesn't want to be a ninja who's able to fight off entire hordes of others? The main problem here comes in the form of the controls, in that you'll find that all too often the aiming reticle will just decide to go off and do its own thing rather than following where you're actually aiming the gamepad. And the touchscreen itself isn't that good at reading your finger movement, and you'll occasionally find that rather than your shurikens bursting forward at the lightning speed you'd hoped, they'll just slowly glide into your opponent and graze them if you're lucky. You also get several unlockable skills that you can use through picking up scrolls that you can rarely find and pick up throughout the game. One of the skills, the Falcons Eye, really sucks, but the others are great at saving you in a pinch. There's not much else I can say about this game really, other than it's just a pretty fun and fast-paced shooting gallery game.
Number 7.
Luigis Mansion. Yes folks, Luigis Mansion is back once again, and in this minigame it's a pretty fun multiplayer game at that. One player uses the gamepad to control the ghost, whilst up to 4 other people control Luigi and co, as they try and bust the ghost. The ghost has to knock out all of the Luigi brothers by grabbing them and causing them to faint, whilst the torches that the Luigi brothers have are used to whittle down the ghost's health from 100 to 0. The game is actually really well balanced, as the stage's size will change depending on the amount of players, as well as the amount of times people have to be taken out, and the amount of monitors that are assisting the team. And the game will always aim to try and have 4 people, that's the balance of Luigis and monitors, on the side against the ghost. Both the ghost and the other players have a special thing that can help them out. The ghost has a charge-up attack that, when used, will prevent everyone from using their torches for a bit, but it will expose him on the screen for a few seconds whilst he has to charge it. The Luigi brothers have these super torches that can be dropped onto the stage, and they have to risk running all the way over there whilst the ghost can be waiting out around the super torch to pick them off. And this gives the game a really good sense of risk and reward to the options available. The main problem this game suffers from though, however, is that it feels too slow paced and not in a sort of suspenseful intense way. Well, that as a ghost you can be waiting a really long time for a good occasion to be able for a strike to occur, and as the attackers you could be desperately running around the map searching for an invisible ghost who is playing to get the time limit run out. Another problem is Monita. As a ghost, Monita is your worst nightmare. She'll go into a complete frenzy and swing the torch wildly in a circle around her, harming any ghost in range, and it can get kind of broken on one of the unlockable levels. Final problem, which is more of a minor nitpick, is that the different stages, whilst each having a nice aesthetic of their own, really don't add that much to the game in terms of gameplay. The only 2 changes that come to mind really are the final stage that I mentioned earlier, and the conveyor belt section in one of the levels, which helps players leap around quicker, but really doesn't add that much to the gameplay to have that conveyor belt there. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty fun game to play, but at its best you want to have as many people as possible in there so Monita doesn't get involved and spin the torch around like crazy.
Number 6.
Mario Chase. This game has arguably the simplest concept: chase and grab Mario. Up to 4 people can play as different coloured toads that have to work together to track Mario down, whilst the one person playing as Mario has their view on the gamepad, along with a map that shows all the other toads' locations. The game is very similar to the Mansion one in terms of balancing, with the map expanding to accommodate more players, and when only one toad is present, there are 2 AI controlled Yoshi carts assisting them to help them grab Mario. The reason this comes above the Mansion game, however, is that it's much faster paced and that makes it all the more fun. On top of that, whilst this game has fewer stages than the Luigis Mansion game, these feel much more larger and varied and allow for different tactics, as each stage has its own different set pieces to feel like more useful parts of the environment, rather than just sort of interesting things in the background. And just maybe I enjoy the super happy upbeat Mario level themes over another Luigi's Mansion theme remix. One small question though, why toads? Wouldn't it make more sense to play as Goombas or Koopas or something that would actually want to catch him? It's a minor nitpick I know, but otherwise it's an enjoyable, if not super simple game.
Number 5.
Balloon Trip Breeze. This game is really a hell of a lot of fun. It's basically a HD remake of the Balloon Trip mode from Balloon Fight on the NES. Now there's something I bet you thought would never get the HD treatment. You play as a balloon fighter in a side-scrolling game where you need to nab balloons for a high score, deliver parcels, and tease a giant fish. The game is played by using the stylus on the touchscreen to direct wind as you please, and unlike the Ninja Castle minigame, this game is actually pretty good at picking up speed and where you're moving along the touchscreen to give you strong and weak bursts of wind as appropriate. There's a great difficulty curve to this game, and there's a really good sense of risk and reward when going for power-ups and balloons, and I absolutely adored the music for this minigame. Honestly, there's a whole lot of fun in here, but there's a little part of me that really wishes there was something more to it. But I guess letting me use my wind powers to create my own tornadoes of sheer destruction to pop balloons for me might be a bit much.
Number 4.
Donkey Kong's Crash Course. Arguably the most challenging minigame in this game, but damn is it still a lot of fun. And it's probably the one that makes the most use of gamepad features. In this game you control a triangle, and you have to make it to the end of a Donkey Kong arcade themed obstacle course on your quest to, I guess, save Pauline? But in this game DK and her are just chalk outlines anyway. So just make a break for the finish line and pick up coins and bananas along the way. The controls for this game include using the left and right analog sticks to turn cogs, blowing into the mic to raise up platforms, and manipulating platforms with the L and R triggers, and most prominently, tilting the gamepad left and right to control where your triangle goes at what speed. And surprisingly, the tilt controls are really smooth and accurate, allowing you to go fast and slow as desired. Bear in mind that if you do go too fast, you may find your triangle crashing headfirst into a wall and it smashes apart completely into pieces. The challenge to this game feels genuinely fair, and like it's an intentional part of level design and not just the game being cheap or the controls backfiring. The construction site setting from the arcade game I think goes really well here with the chart drawing aesthetics, and I think the music for this is really great too, and it just builds upon the super simple tune from the original arcade game. Honestly, the only criticism I have of this minigame is a problem it shares with the F-Zero minigame. The ghosts that appear on this game are only from your current play session, and not as an overall best on the console, which I still think is just a really strange design choice. I feel like if you're going to include a feature like that, it should be taken to its full potential. But other than that, it's a really fun, if not incredibly difficult minigame.
Number 3.
Legend of Zelda Battle Quest. Yeah, I know it's pretty high up on this list, and I've publicly stated before that Zelda is one of my favourite video game series. But seriously, there's no bias here. Okay, maybe a little. But this game is seriously really good. It takes the Zelda series and condenses it down to pretty much just swordplay and archery against hordes of enemies as you travel through various parts of Hyrule in a pretty much on-rails style sort of gameplay that works really well. If you're using the bow and arrow, then you'll be using the gamepad, and turning with it and tilting to find your target, and when found, pulling back on the right control stick and releasing it to fire the shot. If you're going to be using the sword and shield, you'll be using the Wii Remote, but it does require a Wii Motion Plus controller to use rather than just a regular Wiimote. I have to say, the sword play in this game is pretty much one-to-one, and what Skyward Sword wishes it was with how well it controls. Top of that, you can hold the B button to keep your shield in front of you to protect you from enemy attacks, and also stop moving, something that's incredibly useful in this game as it will push you along automatically if you're not holding it, and when playing with other people, you generally don't want to split up too much, so this will come in handy. The game has a lot of stages and can actually get pretty brutal sometimes, especially when you need to do a lot of precise aiming rapidly, such as in a boss fight, and with timing on balls that Wizrobes throw at you. The music and art style for this game, whilst kiddie, is actually really great, and I love all the remixes from the Legend of Zelda series in this game. And the patchwork and children's fun zone aesthetic blends together with the music really well to create something that's a treat for both the eyes and the ears. But to balance out my gushing, there must be something wrong with this to make it not number one, right? Well, two things. First of all, the time attack mode in this feels like an unneeded addition to the game and pretty tacked on. It's just a case of you defeating 25 enemies in the fastest possible time. I guess you could use it to practice your aiming in tight situations, but that's about it. The other issue is something that you might have noticed. When giving out the control schemes earlier, I didn't mention any sort of defensive manoeuvre for those using bow and arrows. And there's technically two. First of all, by pressing the L and R triggers together, you will be able to dodge out of the way of projectiles, but only projectiles. The only times you're actually able to dodge roll your way out of melee combat is when you're up against a boss or another large enemy and they take a swipe at you. The game will quickly flash on screen telling you to tilt left or right, and you have a split second to do so. However, when tilting left or right, it's sort of like the games I mentioned earlier, where you have to flick the gamepad a full 90 degrees in order for it to count, and you only have a very limited time to do so. Other than that though, there really isn't that many complaints about this game. Overall, it's a really great minigame, and playing through all the co-op mode is a great experience because, unlike Pikmin, there's not much of a way to screw over your partner, unless you're a really bad shot, or just kind of a dick.
Number 2.
Animal Crossing Sweet Day. Fortunately, this isn't a game where you have to pay a massive debt to a raccoon, but it's still a pretty sweet game. In all honesty, this is one of the most fun and intense minigames that I've ever played. In this game, one side, the villagers, is comprised of up to 4 people with Wii remotes, and the other side, the guards, is one person playing on the gamepad. The aim of the game is pretty simple. The villagers have to run and collect a certain amount of sweets from the trees, and either deposit them in set locations if there's just one villager, or the villagers have to be holding a certain amount of sweets between themselves if there's multiple people. The player on the guard team has to control both guards at once, with Booker being controlled via the left thumbstick and left trigger, and Copper being controlled by the right thumbstick and right trigger, and they have to try and hit the villagers a total of 3 times before they can actually get all the sweets together that they need to win. This means that in order to be effective, the player controlling the guards has to get pretty good at coordinating and multitasking in this situation, and to be honest, it's something you can easily pick up and master pretty well. And because of that, things can get incredibly fast and chaotic really quickly, but they're all the more fun when they do so. Villagers have to scramble to pick up as much sweets as possible, and then they have to quickly drop it so they're fast enough to flee the scene as Booker and Copper both charge at them with a giant knife and fork. This is one of those games the more players the better, as the goals that the villagers have to actually achieve get higher with each player added, as well as the map size. On top of this, there's certain situations such as sweet trees that require more than one person pressing the button to shake down the sweets, that make players playing as the villagers have to coordinate as much as the person playing as the guards have to do. The game's art style actually suits it incredibly well, as it's basically what the Animal Crossing world would look like if it was made out of fuzzy felt and other craft materials, which is a style that the series lends itself to pretty well. And the music tracks for the levels are a couple of remix tunes from the games, which get more and more intense the closer the villagers are to completing their goal or to failing, and can actually increase the mood and tension rather effectively. When it comes down to it, the game does have a really simple concept, but that works out so well in its favour because everyone can just jump in and play it right away. It's probably the best choice for the most enjoyment in a party game situation, or something similar with friends. But to me, it's still not the best game on here, and that honour goes to
Number 1.
Metroid Blast. People might have thought I gave the Legend of Zelda minigame an easy ride up into the top 3. But the same really can't be said here, as Metroid is really a series I only enjoy a handful of titles from. And I was almost dreading playing this one because, well, it's a third-person shooter. And we all know how well the last third-person Metroid game ended up. But when I got to this game, it was amazing. In this game you play as either Samus on foot with a Wii Motion Plus remote and a nunchuck, or Samus in her gunship on the gamepad. The controls for the game feel great. As Samus on foot, the Wii remote is used to aim your shots, and the shots can be charged up to fire bombs with a massive blast radius. Oddly, they aren't referred to as super bombs, so God only knows how big that blast radius will end up. Wii remote can also be shaken to make Samus do a dodge jump that will give you a couple of invincibility frames and help you out of tight spots, but doing it more than twice will make Samus pause to have to catch her breath, and the rest of the movement for Samus is handled by the nunchuck, which uses the joystick to run, and pressing the C button lets you curl up in the morph ball to roll your way to safety. Controlling Samus in the ship grants you complete flight control by using both of the joysticks, and they have a dash function in order to quickly move into or out of battle. There's also a huge laser mounted on the bottom of the ship, and charging results in a missile which has another huge blast radius, and again, not the super missile, but damn do I wish that was an upgrade. And whilst recording some of this footage for co-op, we discover what may be the greatest thing in this game.
Grapple Ho!
This is the best method for getting around as a team and kicking ass at the same time. Plus, don't you think that just looks amazing? But yeah, the controls for both game modes are solid, and being able to manoeuvre and attack as you please in the ship is super satisfying. But what are the levels actually like? Well, out of all the games, this one actually has the most variety of goals to achieve, like defeating hordes of enemies, collecting items scattered throughout the stage, protecting Miis from enemies, and even a few boss battles, including making his 3D boss battle debut, Kraid. There's actually 30 missions in this game which can be played as either single player or co-op mode, and the game features a great versus mode that can be used to have land and air battles, so all the Samuses, the players can compete against each other to see who is the best, and you get access to all the stages from the single player mode to compete in. The music for this game is superb as well, with plenty of themes and remixes from the Metroid games, and I just love the tech redesign that the enemies have with these little off buttons as weak points, and even Samus' ship has this little touch up point with like these little composite and component inputs on the side of the ship, and I mean, just look at it, isn't that so great? I just love little touches like that. Honestly, I'm really hard pressed to find things I don't like about this minigame. I mean, Samus runs a little too slowly, I guess? But I mean, if the next 3D Metroid decided to go with this sort of gameplay, then I'd be more than happy with that. Seriously, a full game with this sort of control scheme would be fantastic. So that's what I think of the 12 minigames included in Nintendo Land. Overall, I think it's a really fun entry into the Wii U's library and a great introductory title to the system. If you decide to get the console, then I'd definitely consider picking it up as well, as it's well worth your time, as both a fun game to play on your own and as a party game. It's truly my first recommended title for the system. I'd like to apologise for how long it took this episode to actually get out, and I know the title of the series is going to come back and bite me in the ass, but seriously, everything's going to be running a lot more smoother from now on. So I hope you guys will rejoin me, as the next time I will be reviewing New Super Mario Bros. U 1 year on. God, that title's going to kill me.